Hello guys, welcome back to Tax Writers. This is part 2 of the series Set Up Your Environment. In this episode, we want to talk about how to install Linux inside a virtual machine. So we want to install a distribution of Linux inside a virtual machine. But before that, let me explain briefly the concept of distribution. Why I say I want to install the distribution of Linux inside a virtual machine instead of saying that I want to install Linux inside a virtual machine. The thing is, that's indeed can be a nice and interesting topic, but maybe you can read the story on this. I want to just tell you the headlines of this story about GNU and Linux and distributions. The thing is, people usually prefer, the geeks in this field usually try, and they prefer to call the ecosystem as GNU/Linux or GNU Linux. The thing is, Linux is only a kernel. But in order to build an operating system, in order to build a system that works for people, you need more stuff than just a kernel. And that was indeed what the GNU project was intended to do. They started to build a free alternative of commercial available tools. But in the end, they found out that the missing piece is indeed a kernel. And then with a very nice story, I highly recommend you to read this story. That's pretty fun. They added Linux kernel to that project, and it formed GNU Linux ecosystem and operating system, let's say. So GNU is indeed, small utilities, compilers, text editors, and system utilities, system tools, and that are indeed built upon the kernel. And the kernel is, something that allows these tools to communicate with the hardware underneath. So the thing is, if someone wants to install all these things on a system, it becomes very complicated and requires lots of skill to obtain the source code of Linux kernel, and then compile it, and then combine it with other tools from GNU tools and GNU projects. It requires lots of skills. So there are lots of companies or lots of people who just manage to compile these with default configurations for some target audiences or target hardware, and they have compiled and combined and gathered a set of different tools and released them to the internet as something that you can download and easily install in your system, and that's called a distribution. So if you want to install Linux on your system, you need to download a distribution of Linux and install it in your system. There are a wide variety of different distributions. The distribution with which we want to start is indeed Ubuntu. So this is indeed the Ubuntu website. It has various some side projects and various forms for servers, for IoT, for desktop, for different kinds of systems. But the thing is, what we want to download is indeed a relatively older version of Ubuntu version 18, which is indeed a long-term support of Ubuntu. So the thing is, Ubuntu has releases each year, 2 releases per year, and the naming convention is usually a number of year 04, a number of year 10. So for example, in 2018 they have 1804 and 1810. But the thing is, now version 20 of Ubuntu is also available, 20.04. But the thing is, to install scientific computing libraries, I prefer to install and use the previous version, because if you want to use the newest version, maybe because the development of these libraries are not very agile, they are not very quick and fast, it's usually better practice to use the previous versions. And this is what I do usually. So maybe I will upgrade to Ubuntu 20 in the near future, but at this moment, because this is indeed my daily usage of Ubuntu is based on Ubuntu 18, I prefer to use that. And maybe by following some instructions online, you will see that maybe they say that, yeah, this is the instruction for Ubuntu 18. And I also recommend you, if you want to follow me on these tutorials, install this version. But you can also, if you prefer to use the latest version, at least make sure that you download the latest LTS long-term support version. Instead of going, for example, to Ubuntu 21, make sure to download Ubuntu 20.04. because they are more stable and they have better support, especially for third-party tools. So we want to download the desktop image. So I will download the desktop image, which is an ISO disk file. So it's about 2 GB of size. So it takes a bit 4 minutes, it says. So meanwhile, let me prepare my virtual machine. So with virtual machine, I will use VirtualBox, a software from Oracle, which is not an open source friendly company, but they have developed this open source virtual machine software. So you can easily download VirtualBox. It's available for various platforms, but this I have already downloaded the Linux version for my Ubuntu machine. I have an Ubuntu machine here as the host. So the term host means the machine on which you want to install your VirtualBox, for example, installation, and the guest operating system is indeed the operating system that you install inside the virtual machine. So in this case, both the host and the guest will be the Ubuntu distribution. But the thing is, I told you in a previous video, I do that to make sure that my host configuration will remain untouched. And that's also what I want you to do that. I don't want you to install a fresh version of Linux as a dual boot configuration to your system. So it's indeed better way to do that in this approach. So I have already downloaded VirtualBox. So I just run it. The interface is something like this, and what I want to do is indeed I will create a new virtual machine in this folder, and I call it TuxWriters Ubuntu, and the version and the type Linux. This is indeed not important, maybe for some compatibility issues or VM additions and also the requirements things. So what it says, oh sorry guys, I received an error from my recording software, so it needed some modifications. Okay, anyway, so I called it TuxWriters Ubuntu. I specified as the it asks, but usually it's not important. And for the memory, I have to, yeah, let's put it like about 16 gigabytes of memory. I think that's good indeed, according to the available memory that we have. And for the hard disk, it says create a new virtual hard disk now, and the recommended size. So yeah, I will create a new one, and then for the recommended size, it goes to another wizard that probably will allow me to, yeah, for dynamically allocated to create something from this type, which is indeed much better. When you create a virtual machine, it's better to say, instead of fixed size, which will occupy a pre-built virtual disk file from your system, is much better if you select a dynamic allocated, so it allocates on a fly as it goes on. And then this is indeed the initial size and also the limit. So for the limit, I will go to 20 gigabytes or 30 gigabytes. This is just the limit. Okay, so this is indeed my virtual machine and everything is ready to go. So if I click start, this is indeed the start of the virtual machine, and it asks me to provide it with a startup disk. If I press cancel, it would just go on and boots a machine that has no OS. So what should I do is indeed now the download is complete, and the download is located in my download folder, which is here. So you can see I will bring it to the desktop. Maybe it's much easier if it's here. So this is indeed the ISO disk, and what I have to do is indeed I have to say that choose a disk from file. So I want to select this new downloaded ISO file as the CD as a CD-ROM. It's like that I put a CD or DVD inside the optical disc reader, and that's what I want this virtual machine emulator to simulate for me. So now I want to restart the machine. So I restart the machine, this time with that that ISO disk inserted. So you see that the new screen appeared, and this is, I hope that you see that, because now it's very small before I install things. So yeah, it's indeed my Ubuntu installation. That's indeed a live version of the Ubuntu, but then I have to install it. Let's see what happens. Now it's trying to load. And yeah, it brings me the desktop, but I have two choices. So I can try Ubuntu, go back to the live version, or install that. So I install it. And then it asks for the keyboard layout. I'm just okay with this. So let's go on. And a normal installation, a minimal installation. So I will go for the normal installation, but in some cases you may prefer to have nothing installed there, which is, happens a lot. I usually go for this minimal installation, but in this case, because for the sake of time, I don't, for the next episodes, I don't want to install things, one by one. So I prefer it to install everything for me. And it says also, download updates while installing Ubuntu. I don't want to do that. And also third-party software programs. I want that because in some cases you may need some things for additional drivers and those kind of stuff. So I click continue. Then this is indeed very important. Now we are installing the Ubuntu distribution inside the virtual machine, so we can say that erase disk and install Ubuntu there. But in real life, if you install it beside Windows or and beside another version of Linux, you usually want to go to have some manual partitioning of the hard disk. In this case, we will select this one, but make sure you select this only if you are installing it inside a virtual machine. And then we can click install now. It says that I want to partition your hard disk. So we are now in Belgium. Click continue. So our name is Tux Riders. And your computer name would be Tux Riders VirtualBox. I will call it Tux Riders Ubuntu. The username would be Tux Riders, and the password I will select something very simple and log in automatically because I wanted to go directly to the desktop whenever I restart the machine or start the machine. Okay, so we have to wait a bit. You can see that the virtual hard disk is working, the virtual CD-ROM is working. So we have to wait a bit. It says almost finished. Let's see what is going on. And then after this, because now we are installing that inside a virtual machine, one extra step is necessary and is essential. we have to install, if I can find it, maybe, yeah, this one, guest additions, installation, which is indeed something that this, Oracle VirtualBox developers have provided for us. You have to install it inside your guest operating system, and it makes the guest operating system more friendly, communicator with the host operating system. So they will be better friends and they can communicate better. For example, it allows you to adjust the resolution of the guest while you're resizing the screen, or allows you to drag and drop things on your machine. So that's the only step that I will do after installing these things inside. After this install process finished, I will go for that, and then the setup is ready. Then everything is ready to go on. And you saw that installing Linux distribution, in this case Ubuntu, was pretty easy. We just downloaded an ISO file, a disk image, loaded that inside a virtual machine, and we followed the setup process, setup wizard to maybe adjust a couple of things, and that was all. So that is pretty simple. So we have to wait a bit. So I also wait, and then after it finished, I will come back. Okay, so now it's finished, and we have to restart the system. But before restarting the system, like a physical installation of operating system, is usually better practice if we remove the disk from the virtual drive. So that's what we do now. We remove the disk. Yeah, maybe we should first restart, and then during the restarting of the system, yeah, it says here, it asks us to do that. So it says remove the installation medium and then come back and continue to restart. So this is indeed what we have done now. So indeed, it's now removed, and then it says, yeah, now our installed instance should run. Let's see what happens. Something is happening. Oops, yeah. Now we are in, but as you can see that it's how can I cancel it? The thing is now the system has a bad resolution, and the resolution doesn't respond to the host. Now the host and the guests are not communicating with each other, so we have to ask them to do that. We need to install these guest addition disk images. This is what I have to do. Let's see what happens. It says that this wants to run, and we have to provide it with our password for the root user. In Linux, it's called root and not administrator like Windows. So now it says that the VirtualBox is already installed, and it says, yeah, this is asking me to upgrade to the recent version of Ubuntu. At this case, I don't want to do that. Yes, I will do that later. Please don't ask me. So press return to close the window, and now the guest additions are installed, and I have to restart the system. And after that, I think I will have a full functional virtual version of Ubuntu. Should be okay. Let's see if it respond to, and yeah, you see that it now it is communicating with that. I can even drag and drop files here. So so everything is ready for us to go to start to installing things on this system, and that's what we want to do from the next video. So try to do this, try to install the Ubuntu, install the virtual machine, to be sure that you can follow me in the next videos. Okay, see you later. Bye.